Welcome back. This is episode 2, titled Guide Design. How do you take your renovation ideas and translate them into something buildable? Today, we'll take a look at prepping for a renovation, clarifying what you can expect before the walls of your home come tumbling down. In this episode, we're joined by 3 guests: Daniel Jachens, co-owner and guide director of Daniel Builders; Andy Delanardis, design director at Daniel Builders; and Cindy Jakes, interior designer at Buttercup Design. Let's get to it. Daniel, you kind of came up with the idea of a guide. Tell us what a guide does in the design process.
Yeah, well, project guide's kind of role is really to guide the client through the process of a renovation. And when you think of going on an excursion or going on some type of rafting trip or hike or some type of getting to a mountain and it's a strenuous climb, and there's a lot of things you got to get through to get to your mountaintop experience. Sometimes it's necessary to have a guide kind of help you, somebody who has been through a process before, hold you by the hand, so to speak, and walk you through and get you to that mountain. So we like to call ourselves guides because we want to come alongside and help a client through.
As opposed to being a hard salesperson, like, take it now or you leave it. You really want to educate, and your guides are willing to tell people, I wouldn't do this project.
That's right. We want to come alongside somebody, give them good counsel, and help them get to a place where they need to be. And sometimes that place is not utilizing Daniel Builders. Sometimes that is, you need to do this or you need to do this. And so our process is not sales driven. It's coming alongside a person and trying to do whatever is right and best for them.
What are characteristics that you look for in the guides that you put in place in this business model? What are some of the strong characteristics that would make a guide a good guide?
I would say humility is probably one of the characteristics. When you think of a salesman, you think of someone who is trying to push what is really best for them and best for their company. And so when you sit down and you talk to a salesman, whether it be buying a timeshare or a car, and that person is just very forceful with you and telling you and putting a piece of paper in front of you and
trying to get you to sign at all
giving
costs.
you a pen and saying, you need to sign this now.
Yeah.
It throws, turns people off.
Sure.
But when someone comes alongside you and really is there to help guide you and counsel with you and do the right thing, whatever that is, it really kind of helps establish rapport and a relationship with the client. So humility is a key aspect
component
of that. Mm-hmm.
Yes. What does that transition look like? Like, if someone was saying, why couldn't I just go straight to design? What would you tell them? You're teeing it up in certain ways that will help Andy, and maybe Andy, you should answer this question. You're having it teed up for you in such a way that will check a few boxes. What are those boxes?
Sure. So I think, of course, every model looks a little different. Every business model, construction business model looks a little different. Even other project guide, design, build models might look different than ours. But one of the biggest aspects is the communication that happens prior to design ever being involved. So explaining to the client what the process is, the steps that are associated with all those things, and what's kind of the order of those things and why they're beneficial. So there's a lot of communication that happens from Daniel and his team before it ever comes to my team, which is definitely important for setting us up for a good design client and good design process as well. So tons of communication that happens with the client before we're ever involved. And then, of course, when somebody wants to move forward into design, a lot of communication happens internally that prepares the design team for that project before we ever even meet the client. So a lot of budget discussions, what the existing situation is and why the client wants to move into some kind of construction project. What are the things that are causing them concern? What are bad experiences that they've had in the past that might be concerns of theirs, and we need to be aware of issues that they have with the current layout of the house that might be preventative for the way they want it to function, that we need to try and come in with an idea of how to fix. Stuff like that.
And you're saying the guides are addressing
Yeah,
most of that.
that's all being addressed before we're involved, or being addressed as we meet internally before the design team even meets the client or sees the project.
Nice. You mentioned your design team. I know Cindy is part of that. Can you tell us what the makeup of that design team is?
Sure. So for us, we have an architect that's on staff, and we have a draftsman that's on staff. Those, obviously in a different format could be outsourced positions that somebody needs to hire, but generally speaking, somebody that's doing drawing work, and might need to be an architect depending on the situation. And of course, we use, our design team, we use a system of project managers. So every client gets assigned to a design project manager, who then takes over kind of the lead role of communication from the project guide through the design process, and is coordinating between the architect or draftsman or both, the designer, and the client, and all the other pieces that come into play. Sometimes we might need a structural engineer, or we might need DHEC, for a septic system. Just all those little pieces that come into play in thinking ahead about what's going to be needed for different certifications or different applications that need to be filled out and submitted to get approval for the build project. All those things are being worked on by the design project manager through the process.
And then Cindy, your role as an interior designer, give us a little bit of an idea and dispel any myths that may be associated with what an interior designer is all about.
Well, I step in when it goes to the design phase, and we work together as a team, like Andy said. And before we even meet the client, just understanding the project. And then once we meet the client, just making them feel comfortable with all of us. And then I always ask them to share inspiration ideas, any pictures or anything that they have of what they think they might want to do with their house. Talk about the functional needs, and just make them feel comfortable, so that this process is fun and it's not, we don't want it to be stressful. And for a lot of people, it's very, very stressful. So we just try to make it fun, relaxing, and let them know that we're going to take care of all those details, and we're going to make sure that it's very thorough and pulled together in a way that when they go into production, it just is seamless, and they won't have to make decisions as they go.
We joke around that Cindy gets to do the fun shopping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I do, really. Shop.
Go shopping.
Now, there's a lot more that she does than just that, but there is a lot of fun that happens through that part
Yeah,
too.
we
So.
do have a good time.
So it looks like one theme I see going through the whole process is putting people at ease, because you're right. You're doing something that's going to radically change the place you live in.
Right.
And it's probably going to cost a lot of money. So you want to get it right.
Yes.
Definitely.
And we want it to be what they want it to be. And you asked about the biggest
Myth.
Yeah, that would be, I think a lot of designers, it's really not a myth, honestly, because there are some designers who really just want to build their own portfolio, and they want to do something in your home that's going to make them look better, kind of like the sales guy at the car dealership, and for their own interest. And so I think just being that person that you want what they want. I mean, I'm going to guide them into like what I think is going to look good, and I'll warn them if I think they're going in a bad direction on something functionally. But in the end, it needs to look like them and not just something out of a magazine that is just not even their personality or goes with their lifestyle.
Does it get awkward ever when someone is going a direction and they're really strong-willed about it, and you're like, don't really feel that that's the best way?
I mean, I don't know that it gets awkward. If I feel like, especially if it's a functional issue, I will definitely voice my opinion that I think that maybe we're making a mistake by not having one closet in the entire house. That happened once. Something like that. But if it's a paint color or something that, they just love that color, I have found that if we just go with it, they love that color and they still love that color. And it's not maybe what I would want, but they love it. And if for some reason they don't, it's paint. If it's a more expensive finish, like a tile or something that's going to be harder to change, I might be a little more vocal
You
about
might
it
dig in a little bit,
and just explain
really
how
consider
hard it will
this.
be to change it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, another theme I see running through this conversation is relationship. And it sounds like that gets started with the guides.
Yeah,
Am I right?
Yeah, relationship is key because you start building trust with that person from, day one. And so if you don't trust the person, if you don't have a relationship with the person that you're working with, that really does present some issues and problems, especially as you're moving forward with a big renovation. You're going to be attached to that company or that person for quite a while. So you better be comfortable, with whoever you're working with.
Absolutely. Once the guide is finished, do they still maintain that relationship? Because I know a lot of times they become the point person for that client for future renovations. Like we'll see renovations with the same client a couple different times.
Yeah, within the process, we have, different key people taking the key role, with that client. And so, the guide does hand off to design, and then the design does hand off to build. But the goal is to, circle back and have a celebration with the client at the end, and try to maintain that relationship, because we do see clients return. We do see clients doing 2 and 3, major renovations, or maybe they buy another house and they do something different. So, yeah, relationship is definitely key.
That's a big honor too, to have somebody come back. It's an indication that you're doing something right.
Doing something
Good. If they're coming back to you. Well, what would be a reasonable expectation as far as timeline? Can we get a kitchen design done in a week, or should we expect longer?
HGTV can.
Yeah, that has actually shaped a lot of how people see the renovation process. But educate us and enlighten us, Andy.
So I think, in the world of renovations or in the world of design work, there probably are situations, very specific ones, where a kitchen could get designed in a week. What that would mean is, if people have a job that they go to from 8 to 5, they take that week off. They're so focused on the design work that I guess what I'm saying is, in reality, there's generally not a situation where that's going to be true. Number one, because in the business that we're in, it's unreasonable for our architect to only have one project that he's working on at one time, right? Or it's just not efficient. It doesn't work out that way for any of us to really only work on one project at one time. Nor do most people have the time to spend that much time just every day. The other thing is, if you move too quickly through design, you miss pieces, you miss details that need to be thought out and thought through. We also include the quoting as part of that process. So all the numbers that have to be gathered from the vendors and the installers and just all the different pieces that have to go into that usually takes longer than a week. And of course, with the economy the way it is right now, where just everybody's kind of got a lot of work to do, you got some smaller companies especially where the installer is the quoter and the business owner all at the same time, and he might have a crew of a couple guys, but he's trying to manage projects, get new quotes done. I mean, that it just doesn't all happen that fast. So, I mean, the time for design really does depend on the size of the project. It depends on the customization of the project. If it's a room that is not a kitchen or a bathroom, or a renovation that's not including one of those, maybe there's less things to choose. But kitchens, especially, and bathrooms, there's lots of stuff to pick out and think through. A design might take, 4 or 5 weeks to put together, including all the quoting. It might take months to put together, or even a year if it's a huge project with lots of details. So we try to communicate that, throughout the process. You set up a schedule. Here's our target dates for key important meetings or deadlines for certain things that we need to have done at a certain time, and then a total, deadline for when the whole design is kind of coming together. But those things do shift around depending on, what things change or what ideas come up during design that influence that. And of course, you've got, just life that happens. People are going on vacations and have to take a break, or somebody gets sick, or there's all kinds of different things that could happen that influence that.
So you got to stay flexible to some degree. It
Sure.
sounds like
Yeah.
it can't be a hard and fast timeline, but at the same time, you're very intentional in each of these steps, pushing towards a finished product.
It's good to get it all on paper before you start a renovation. And one of the things that I see often is that, people commit to a builder or commit to a renovator, and they have no plan. They have nothing in front of them that is a roadmap to show them what they're getting or how it's going to be done. And so most of the time that ends in a problem, ends in an issue. And we've seen a lot of that from people who've had that experience, and they've come and they've told us how well this helps them understand what they're getting, and what to expect when that construction actually starts.
It's the proverbial kicking the tires prior to the purchase, right?
That's right.
Well, let's talk about budget. So obviously, cost, price, that plays an enormous role in all of this. How do you go about giving somebody a reasonable expectation on price? And then Cindy, let's start with you. How do you keep them in that budget when you go out making selections and you're looking around and seeing some really nice things that might destroy that budget?
Yeah. So we have that conversation with them when we have the first initial kickoff meeting, is kind of, where are they on budget? They've been given this range, but how do they feel about that range? And are they flexible? If they do walk into a showroom and find something that they just absolutely love, but it's going to knock them way out of their budget, do they want me to kind of reel them in? Or, are they willing to do that on some things if they really care about it? Or are they really, this is the top number? And so we try to have that discussion on the front end so that I know going into the showroom kind of where they are on that. And then before we go into any showroom, I have a very thorough list of every selection that needs to be made in that showroom. I have a budget number, and I'm in the showrooms enough, and the the reps are wonderful at working with me at keeping them as close to that budget as we can. And I know when they're stepping out big time, and so does the vendor rep. So we'll tell them, and sometimes they're like, "No, I want that round tub with all the jacuzzi, and it's just awesome, and I want it." And we're like, "We love it, as long as you understand that there's going to be a consequence cost wise." So the showrooms are gorgeous, and they do a really good job of doing sparkly things that make them want to purchase.
Do you try to put on blinders sometimes?
Sometimes, and literally sometimes, like, don't even look at that wall, just keep walking past the marble mosaic tile,
Sometimes the client asks for that. Don't point me in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll
Reel
say,
me in. Huh?
if I'm like way off, let me know, because most of our showrooms don't have pricing on the items. So sometimes they just have no idea that what they're looking at is drastically higher than this item that's not that far off aesthetically, but maybe it's the material it's made out of, or whatever. There's different reasons that it could be a lot higher. So it's not fair not to at least tell them that.
Setting those pricing expectations starts with the guides.
Mm-hmm. And that has become a challenge, especially lately, with all the challenging things in our market, as far as price increases and materials and that kind of thing. So it has been definitely a challenge to communicate, because usually sometimes what has happened is, by the time we get to the end of a project, material prices have fluctuated so much that there are issues by the time we get to the end. So it has been a challenge in our current market for sure.
Well, once you get that design package complete, is the client pretty much locked in at that point, or is there any more flexibility left in the design process?
Oh yeah, so we'll often put together multiple options in specific areas for a client. Like, say they go to a showroom and they see something they really like, but they know it's going to cost more, so they might ask us to price that item and the installation of it, but kind of keep it as a separate, and have a plan A and a plan B. So we're often presenting at the end of our design process, along with the budget or the pricing, we're also presenting options a lot of times. Or sometimes we just get to the end and the client will ask us the simple question of where are some areas we can save some money, and we'll work through that process with them, trying to find some specific spots where they can save money. And once again, we have another discussion, where they want to be on their price and for the overall project, and see what we can find that might get them there. But then even after that, during construction, of course, there's the dreaded change order word. But the change orders they can be bad in the sense that they sometimes, a lot of times, cost more. It's an addition to cost. But
Do those come back to you in design, or do they stay in the field primarily?
Sometimes, but ordinarily they stay in the field, and a lot of times they're a benefit to the client. Like they'll notice something that they want to change, and there's nothing wrong with kind of them. It's their space. They're going to be the ones that are enjoying and living in that space and using that space. So it's a good thing if they catch something that they want to do differently, and we have no problem doing that. Of course, if it comes with a new fixture or a different layout, sometimes it comes back to us to help redesign or work through and pick out the different items that need to go with that. And once again, we're geared toward trying to provide that client with a useful, functional space that they're going to enjoy and that looks and feels the way they want it to feel. So however we need to, whatever we need to do get them there, we try to do that.
You use the word functionality. Cindy, I know you play a part in that too, helping discern what is the most functional way the space could be designed. What are some key pointers or factors that go into making a space functional?
Well, I think a lot of people just have trouble visualizing spaces. And so they're looking at a floor plan that's kind of from the top down, and they just don't think about how the traffic flow is going to move around in that room, especially in kitchens. So if somebody's going to be getting something out of the refrigerator, can someone still walk behind them and get to the trash can? And just things like that, especially in the kitchen. That seems to be an area where the function is just really important. Do you want your microwave in your island? Because that might mean you have to get down low to put the numbers in, and some people, especially very tall people, don't want to do that. So it's just, and every person's different and everybody's needs are different. But I would see it as a huge fail on my part if we went to the celebration and they were like, well, we really love everything. The only thing is, we can't open the dishwasher and the trash can at the same time because they're right across from each other and they bang right into each other. That would be a big fail. Yeah. So that's just as important as it being pretty, because you got to live in it.
Sure.
So the architects and draftsmen, they do a great job of space planning, and we're thinking about that kind of stuff when we visit the client's house. What furniture are they going to keep that's in their existing space that they're going to reuse? That gives us the opportunity to just measure that item and put it right in the plans and maybe lay it out the way they think it's going to go. Just we want a queen bed in this bedroom and we want a king bed in that. I mean, stuff like that helps us make sure that there's enough space to move around, how the door's going to swing, which way is it going to go? Is it going to bump into a piece of furniture or another item that's in the room because we didn't make enough room for that? Those kind of things are really important to get on paper and see what the actual measurements are going to be.
So somebody's inspired to do a renovation in their home and they're all excited and they've heard about this guide, design, build process. They pick up the phone, call Daniel Builders. What does that conversation look like?
Yeah, so when they call the guide or when they call the main line, the guide's job is to kind of talk them through the process of what it looks like to come to your home and kind of review the project, understand what the client wants, and then to be able to put together, a kind of a range, what we call a target investment range.
So are you putting out numbers and ranges in that first conversation? Or is
Not
that
really. I mean, sometimes we will give you an understanding roughly of what a kitchen would cost if we kind of understand just from past experience. But usually it takes a week or so to come back with that range.
Once you transition into design as a client, it does kind of take a little bit of a life of its own. How many times or how frequently do you see a project starting one way but ending completely different than what you initially expected, or does that rarely ever happen?
It always happens to some extent, maybe not, a complete change and so I would say projects that are more like single rooms tend to stay fairly close to what the original scope and layout ideas were. Multi-room or, whole house renovations a lot of times will take on a little because there's there's a lot more to be figured out with wall layouts and room spacing and stuff like that. So a lot of times they will change more drastically. I think a lot of it is dependent on the personality and the type of client that we're working with. Some people um, have more ability, just capability to think through those kind of things, and they kind of just know what they want more on the front end. And other people are very open to new ideas and they want to see lots of different ideas laid out. And so we try to give them, at least a multiple schemes that would show them, some different options that they might have, and they might, take those schemes and pick one aspect from one scheme and an aspect from another scheme, and we end up with some combination. So those ones have a little bit more just variation. So probably those bigger, larger multi-room renovations, end up changing more over the course of a design from what the original ideas were compared to smaller ones.
Now, once that package is complete, what happens next? You sit down with the client and you
The
say
design
this
package?
the design package, correct? Do you sit down with the client and say, so this is what you got and this is what it costs? And then if they say, yeah, let's do it, what happens then? Are they put on a waiting list to start building, or they go right into build, or do they get introduced to another group of people?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, when somebody's ready to move forward, they're going to get assigned a build project manager. So that we kind of change once again. The point person from our design team becomes now the build team, our team that implements construction. So they're going to get a build project manager. So the discussion normally is, we talk about time frames for start, time frames for completing construction, and then when all those things are going to take place. So we usually start with another on-site meeting so they can meet their build project manager, meet our build director, talk about some logistics like where's the dumpster going to go, how are our team going to get access to the house with a lockbox for a key, or just whatever, those kind of logistics. And then obviously start date is a big important one, especially if people have to move out of a portion of their house or out of the house completely, move furniture around, that kind of stuff. So we're usually planning minimum 30 days before we can actually start being on site doing construction. And that's because you've got a lot of ordering to do. You've got a lot of subcontractors and internal labor that you've got to organize schedules, and those guys have already committed to things ahead of time, so that nobody can just drop everything they're doing to start this new project necessarily. And normally the client doesn't want that anyway. They want a little bit of time to kind of figure out some of the details of what they're going to be doing. If they're going to live in the house and we're doing a kitchen remodel, what are they going to do to, are they going to kind of set up a little temporary kitchen area? What laundry is another big one. What are they going to do for if we're moving their washer and dryer? What are they going to do for washing their clothes in the next however many weeks or months that it might take to finish their renovation? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that that happens, and then sometimes that does get pushed out farther. I mean, if we have a busy construction schedule and we've got a lot of projects going currently, and somebody signs up to move into construction, it might take longer for us to get started on their project, or as we know, as we've been talking about a couple of times already, the market sometimes dictates when we can get materials. So if there's a certain kind of space that needs a specific product and that product is not available because of lead times for 20 weeks, there's not a lot of reason for us to tear their space apart and then have it just sit there for a while until that product shows up. So we try to keep an eye on the market and those items, the things they've picked out, just so we don't put them in a bad position.
One of the big benefits of this whole process is that you have the builder giving input through the design process. And I guess to some degree, every one of you interacts with those who are actually implementing the design, the builders. Tell me what that looks like as far as the builder putting their 2 cents in through that design phase.
I think it's helpful when you have a team of people working on the design versus one or two people, because you can have a great design that is, put forth before a client, and the builder maybe hasn't had any input into that, and so you can come back and have this astronomical price tag that was associated with that design because, yeah, it looks great, but it's not real practical. So I think having everybody involved as a team working towards that goal line or that mountaintop experience is a really good thing.
And we're constantly interacting with other departments. So, I mean, obviously, it's not our project guide team is not completely separate from our build team, completely separate from our design team or our all the other aspects of our company. We always have meetings where we're talking about what's going well, what's not going well. So we're learning and gaining experience throughout the process. And if during design a question about how we could actually implement something that a client wants comes up, we can go ask the build team, hey, how do you guys think? And give those guys input into how they would construct it if they were the ones building it. We kind of learn from each other, and we have a number of people that we can go to that have experience in different areas that is beneficial to the client.
And that's a huge benefit of Daniel Builder team, that everyone's working together as one team versus you hiring an architect and hiring a designer and hiring a contractor and expecting them to communicate with each other to give you the best product. It just doesn't happen because they're not in one office together. They're not just constantly communicating. And so the benefit, a huge benefit to this in design, is that we're all here together constantly talking and throwing ideas. And while the draftsman's coming up with renderings, he can specifically say, hey, what were you thinking on the direction of this tile and this shower wall? Things like that, to where if you're having to wait and stop and have a meeting and call, you just can't do that to the level of just the nth degree that you can do when you're here together.
Yeah, and it's nice. I know from the builder standpoint, once it goes into build, they can reach back to you,
right?
And you're a resource to them even at that point. Well, appreciate you guys taking time to give some clarity to what design is all about.
Yeah, thanks for having us here and asking lots of questions.
Yeah, wealth of information. If Daniel Builders or this team could ever be a help to you, feel free to reach out to us at danielbuilders.com. Thanks for listening.
We're delighted you tuned in for today's episode of Ready, Set, Renovate, your guide design build resource. Are you ready for your home to undergo a transformation? We'd love to talk to you about it. Visit us at danielbuilders.com and tell us about the home renovation you envision. In the meantime, subscribe to Ready, Set, Renovate, and we'll keep the renovation inspiration coming.